I am pleased to welcome to the London Book Fair 2014 our author Zak Seridarian, who wrote a beautiful book about Parma, not about Parma, but set in Parma.
Yes.
So, could you tell us something about this book?
Yeah, sure.
And also something about yourself, why you happened to write something set in Parma, and some mystery around the story that you talk about.
Yeah, well actually I could do both at the same time because the book is semi-autobiographical. So as in, I moved to Parma, and the story is about an English chief inspector who retires from London to go to Parma with a view to enjoying his life, because Parma is very different to London. It's smaller, everything is more under control, as it were. It's a peaceful city, but things didn't quite work out for him. Luckily they worked out more peacefully for me. But for Inspector Hammond, he gets thrown into a case of revenge against somebody who's trying to take revenge on him and the other protagonist in the story, which is an Italian inspector called Sergio.
So it is a thrilling thriller.
Well, yeah, or a yellow book, a giallo, as you say in Italy. Well, yeah, sort of. It's. I wanted to write something which was a bit in line with what I'm interested in when it comes to detective stories. So something in between a bit of Sherlock Holmes and a bit of Inspector Morse, which were types of detectives who I really like. They're very in touch with themselves. There's a human element. They're interested in people, and I wanted to make it more personable as opposed to scientific, which was the trend at the time, which was going towards too much forensics and ballistics and so on. I wanted to go the other way, and Parma's a great backdrop for that.
Is it?
Parma's, because it's the history of Parma. I was totally unfamiliar with before. I never knew that Napoleon's second wife became the Duchess of Parma for 20 odd years, and she influenced the cultural development and social development in Parma, so she had a big influence there. And superficially you see a very relaxed city. On the surface it's wonderful, the food is great, everybody knows about the food in Parma, the people are very friendly and welcoming. But then you start to scratch under the surface, and everything you'd expect in a metropolis, you can actually find in Parma. So all of the sleaze, the drugs, the sexual things that you wouldn't expect in such a small town, they all exist in Parma. So it's very interesting.
So have you had experiences in, have you lived in other towns? That's why you can compare Parma to a bigger town like London.
Yeah, London and Berlin and Los Angeles and New York. Not necessarily where I've lived, but where I've experienced, I've read a lot about.
Yes.
Parma's comparable because it has a vast mixture of people in a very small quantity of people. So it's a city of 183,000, but every type almost is represented there. And it has a particular identity, because the people from Parma have their own identity, but at the same time they also reflect the differences in society that you would find in any city. So rich and poor, then you have people who are perhaps a little bit more down to earth, others who are more snobbish, shall we say, which Parma is also famous for. And then in general, the Italian way of life and the Italian way of being is thoroughly expressed in Parma, and it was such a... I mean, for example, in London you see people walking down the street having a telephone conversation. They're very muted. Their conversation is perhaps more secretive. They're more introverted publicly. But in Parma there were people doing business on their mobile,
perhaps in a cafe, and with other people hearing.
It's wonderful. I mean, you find out all of their customers, and other people have their personal arguments with their boyfriend or girlfriend, and it's so colourful. It's wonderful.
So you would suggest to read your book, well, you would suggest to...
I definitely suggest to read the book, yeah.
I mean, yes, but also to other people who don't live in Parma, so that they can find out more about Parma.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't claim to be a historical or cultural authority on Parma. I think there are perhaps a lot of people who are better placed to write more about the details of Parma than I am. But I managed to make friendships with people from different arenas or different fields or different backgrounds in Parma. So I became friends with the policemen, so therefore I managed to find out about the drug trade, the involvement of the mafia locally, about levels of prostitution and so on. But then I'm also friends with lawyers and people in politics to get other background information. And putting it all together, and also, you know, getting to know the people who work in shops or work in cafes, and to hear the voice of the people at the same time, and to try to put that all together, just to have maybe just touching the surface of what really is Parma, but trying to introduce a detective story at the same time. So.
And why the title Arrivals? What does it suggest, or what does it mean?
Well, I mean, it's based on, because as soon as the inspector arrives, and the first scene is set in Parma Airport, and so to give an impression of this extremely small airport, which after I finished writing was doubled in size actually, so maybe somebody read.
But it's still very.
It's still quite small, yeah.
It's
still quite small, yeah. And also because it's the first part of what I hoped and still hope that will become a series, and therefore it's an arrival on the scene of this new character. So slightly metaphorical as well.
Yes. So, can you tell us something about this mystery?
Yeah, a little bit, without giving too much away. Essentially, there's a character who calls himself the Khan, who develops or has developed some kind of secretive power base over a period of time. But nobody was ever aware of him. And then he suddenly avails himself, and so the police force in Parma and also Hammond are totally unaware of who this person may be. So at first they start looking into their own pasts, because the two are connected. So Sergio's son was taken hostage and then left in the Parco Ducale naked, but his clothes are then delivered to Hammond's home. So immediately this person is trying to get Sergio and Hammond to work together. So they believe that this person is carrying out a form of revenge on both of them. Obviously that's not necessarily the case towards the end, and we find out who the character really is. But it keeps them guessing.
Have you any questions? Can you think of any questions?
So anyway, the book is supposed to give an idea of an Englishman's impression of Parma, but also Italian society.
Yes.
To show the differences, but also the similarities.
Yes.
Okay, so to say that this is a wonderful cultural variety of humanity, but in truth, no matter how different people are, the reasons behind why we do things are frequently the same. So even within our differences, there are similarities.
Yes. Well, so we can simply tell our possible readers to buy the book and download it. We can remember that they can read your book on any device, on an iPad, tablet, iPhone, or smartphone, and so it's always also very easy to read it also when traveling around without carrying any weight. And so we also expect a second book, another arrivals.
Well, another
series.
Maybe a departure, but yes.
Departure, yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
And I am looking forward to reading the second series, so perhaps departures, or so we start from arrivals and then there will be a departure, the other way around. Okay, so thank you very much, Zak.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming to the London Book Fair.
It's a pleasure.
And thank you.